Before you can love another person fully, you have to understand what it means to love yourself. This isn't about selfishness or arrogance. It's about building the kind of foundation that makes love possible, stable, and enduring. When you lack self-love, relationships often become a search for something external to fix what feels broken inside. You end up looking to another person to validate you, to complete you, to make you feel worthy. But that path never leads to lasting peace because no one else can give you what you refuse to give yourself. The truth is, love that begins without self. Love is like building a house on sand. It may look beautiful on the outside, but the foundation is unstable and eventually it collapses. When we talk about self-love, we're not speaking about indulgence or vanity. We're speaking about respect, about kindness toward yourself, about treating your mind, your body, and your spirit with the care they deserve. Emotional stability in a relationship is not something your partner can hand to you. It's something you bring into the relationship. And that stability begins with how you see yourself when you're alone, not when you're with someone else. Think about this. If you don't know your worth, how will you recognize when someone else undervalues you? If you don't respect yourself, how will you set boundaries when those boundaries are crossed? And if you cannot forgive yourself for your flaws and mistakes, how will you ever extend true forgiveness to another person? Self-love isn't a luxury, it's a requirement. Without it, you bring insecurity, fear, and dependency into love. With it, you bring confidence, clarity, and balance. Psychologically, this is crucial because our sense of self forms the filter through which we interpret the actions of others. A person who has not cultivated self, love may interpret distance from a partner as abandonment, criticism as rejection, or conflict as confirmation of unworthiness. On the other hand, someone who has built emotional stability through self-love understands that disagreements do not erase value, that imperfections are part of being human, and that their worth does not rise or fall with another person's opinion. This is what makes relationships healthier, not the absence of challenges, but the presence of two people grounded in their own stability. Philosophically, self-love connects to the idea that you cannot give what you do not have. How can you give unconditional love to someone else if you have never learned to give it to yourself? Loving yourself teaches you patience, teaches you compassion, teaches you to embrace imperfection. Those lessons become the very qualities that allow you to love someone else with depth and resilience. Without that internal practice, love remains shallow, fragile, dependent on circumstances instead of rooted in truth. But let's be honest, learning to love yourself isn't easy. For many, it means unlearning years of self-criticism, silencing the voice that says, "You're not good enough," and rejecting the belief that worthiness depends on achievement or approval. It requires facing your flaws without shame and your strengths without arrogance. It's a daily practice of reminding yourself, "I am enough even as I grow. I am valuable even when I stumble." This mindset doesn't make you perfect, it makes you whole. And when you enter a relationship from a place of wholeness, something extraordinary happens. You no longer see your partner as someone who must complete you, but as someone who complements you. You don't cling to them out of fear of being alone. You choose them out of love, not desperation. That choice creates freedom, and freedom creates trust. A relationship built on two stable individuals doesn't collapse under pressure, because each person knows how to hold themselves steady and, therefore, how to hold each other steady too. Self-love also changes the way you handle conflict. Without self-love, conflict feels like an attack on your very identity. With self-love, you can separate the disagreement from your sense of worth. You no longer need to win every argument to feel validated, because validation is something you've already given yourself. That kind of emotional stability transforms not only romantic relationships, but every relationship in your life, family, friends, colleagues, because people can sense when you are secure in who you are. Ultimately, the way you love yourself sets the tone for every other form of love you give and receive. And if you want to love others in a way that is deep, meaningful, and enduring, it has to start at home with you. Self-love is not a selfish act. It's a gift to everyone around you. It ensures that the love you bring into the world is not tainted by insecurity or fear, but is rooted in confidence, balance, and truth. So, let me leave you with this thought. If you want to love others well, begin by loving yourself enough to be whole. Because only when your own foundation is stable can you build something strong with someone else. And remember, love that is born from self-love is the kind of love that doesn't just last, it transforms. When we speak about the importance of self-love, it's not only about how you see yourself, but also about the energy you project into the world. That energy becomes the lens through which people perceive you, the way they treat you, and the way your relationships evolve. The reality is simple: people mirror back to you what you believe about yourself. If you carry yourself with insecurity, constantly seeking validation, you unconsciously teach others to treat you as if your value is negotiable. But when you stand firm in self-worth, you set a standard that others either rise to meet or fall away from. And this is the quiet power of self-love. It shapes the dynamics of love, respect, and intimacy in every connection you have. Think for a moment about the people you admire. They may not be the wealthiest, the most attractive, or the most talented, yet there's something about them that radiates strength. That strength is rooted in the way they view themselves. When you know who you are and carry that knowledge with grace, others cannot help but notice. Self-love commands respect without having to demand it. It creates an aura of stability, of presence that draws people in, not because you need them, but because your independence makes your love genuine, not transactional. This is where many relationships go wrong. When someone lacks self-love, relationships become negotiations for worth. Love turns into a constant test. Do you really care for me? Will you prove it? Will you choose me? These questions arise not from the other person's behavior, but from an internal emptiness. The relationship becomes strained because it's asked to carry a burden it cannot bear. The burden of healing wounds that only the self can heal. Without self-love, even the most sincere gestures from a partner never feel like enough. You're left chasing reassurance instead of building connection. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine entering a relationship with self-respect, clarity, and boundaries already established. Instead of asking, will this person make me feel whole? You ask, does this person align with the wholeness I already carry? That shift changes everything. The love you give is not conditional on being completed because you already feel complete. The love you receive is not a desperate grasp for validation, but a mutual exchange of respect and affection. That's why relationships built on self-love feel lighter, freer, less like survival and more like growth. Psychologists often talk about attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, disorganized. And while many of these patterns come from childhood, one of the most powerful ways to shift your attachment style in adulthood is through self-love. When you affirm your worth, you begin to heal the anxious pull toward constant reassurance or the avoidant fear of closeness. You build security within yourself, and that security becomes the anchor in your relationships. This is not abstract theory. It is lived reality. People who practice self-love tend to create healthier partnerships, not because they find perfect people, but because they approach love with clarity, not confusion. There's also a philosophical truth here worth considering. The ancient Greeks spoke of different types of love eros: philia agape and philatia, self-love. And they understood something we often forget: philatia, when healthy, is not selfish. It is the root from which all other forms of love grow. Without it, eros becomes obsession, philia becomes dependence, and agape becomes martyrdom. But with it, love is balanced, generous, and strong. Self-love does not shrink your capacity to give. It expands it because you no longer give from emptiness, but from fullness. This is why your relationship with yourself becomes the training ground for all other relationships. The way you speak to yourself in your mind is the way you'll eventually speak to others in moments of stress. The way you forgive yourself for mistakes is the model for how you forgive others when they fall short. The way you respect your own boundaries is the way you teach others to respect them too. Self-love is not something private and hidden. It echoes outward, shaping the entire way you exist in love. But let me also say this clearly: self-love is not about perfection. Some people think, I can't love myself until I fix all my flaws, achieve all my goals, or become who I want to be. That mindset keeps you trapped in a cycle of never being enough. True self-love is not about waiting until you are flawless. It is about embracing yourself as you grow, as you stumble, as you learn. It is about saying, even in my imperfections, I am worthy of respect. Even in my struggles, I deserve kindness. That mindset not only transforms how you treat yourself, but how others treat you, because people learn from your example. And here's the final point. When you cultivate self-love, you filter out the wrong relationships before they have the chance to destroy you. You no longer settle for half-hearted love, for disrespect, for manipulation, because you know what you deserve. Self-love is a shield. It doesn't stop you from being open or vulnerable, but it protects you from confusion between love and harm. When you love yourself, you know the difference between someone who uplifts you and someone who diminishes you. So remember this: self-love is not a destination, it's a daily practice. It's the quiet, consistent choice to honor yourself, to respect your worth, and to never outsource your value. And when you carry that within you, your relationships transform, not because they are perfect, but because they are grounded in truth. Let me leave you with this thought: the love you give others can only rise as high as the love you give yourself. If you want to experience deeper, healthier, more enduring relationships, start with the mirror, because the way you see yourself sets the ceiling for how love unfolds in your life. When we think about love, most of us imagine the giving side, the sacrifices, the care, the devotion we extend to others. But what often goes unnoticed is that the quality of what we give is directly shaped by what we first nurture within ourselves. If you approach love with emptiness, with unresolved wounds or insecurities, what you offer is colored by need and fear. Love then becomes a transaction, an attempt to fill a void. But when you approach love from a place of inner strength and wholeness, it becomes something entirely different. It becomes a gift, not a plea. The truth is, every relationship you build, whether with a partner, a friend, or even your family, is a mirror of your inner state. If you carry resentment toward yourself, you'll project it onto others. If you doubt your own worth, you'll doubt the sincerity of every act of affection. But when you accept yourself, when you genuinely love who you are, that love overflows into the way you treat people. Self-love doesn't just transform the inner dialogue in your mind, it transforms the very way you show up in the world. Think about someone you've met who radiates peace. They aren't loud, they aren't flashy, yet you can feel a steadiness about them. That steadiness doesn't come from what others give them. It comes from what they've already cultivated inside. They don't love others because they're desperate for love in return. They love others because they have learned to extend to others the same patience and kindness they give themselves. That is the essence of authentic love, rooted in a reservoir that doesn't run dry when circumstances shift. Now consider the opposite. A person who hasn't learned self-love often confuses control with care. They hold tightly to relationships, not out of genuine affection, but out of fear of being abandoned. They might smother with attention or withdraw in silence, constantly testing the other person's commitment. Their love, though well-intentioned, is heavy because it carries the weight of unhealed wounds. And here's the irony: this very grasping, this fear-driven expression of love often drives people away. Not because they don't care, but because love becomes suffocating when it is rooted in need rather than freedom. This is why philosophers and psychologists alike emphasize that love is not just an emotion, it is a state of being. Erich Fromm, in his classic work, The Art of Loving, said that love is not something we fall into. It is something we learn, something we practice, something we embody. And that practice begins within ourselves. Self-love teaches us patience, teaches us forgiveness, teaches us how to nurture without condition. Without it, our attempts to love others are fragmented, incomplete. There's also a profound psychological dynamic here. When you love yourself, you develop boundaries, not walls, but boundaries. You understand what you deserve, and you no longer tolerate mistreatment disguised as affection. This does two things simultaneously. It protects you from unhealthy relationships, and it teaches others how to love you in return. But it also enhances how you love others. You no longer give in ways that breed resentment. You no longer overextend yourself in the hope of being validated. Instead, you love freely without keeping score because your worth is not on the line. And this is where the transformation truly happens. Self-love doesn't just make you stronger in solitude. It makes your love purer in connection. Instead of pouring from an empty cup, you pour from abundance. Instead of loving to be loved, you love, because you've already discovered that love within yourself. That shift creates an entirely different kind of relationship dynamic, one where affection is not conditional, one where respect is mutual, and one where growth is shared. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine a partner who doesn't love themselves. Every disagreement becomes a threat. Every moment of silence feels like rejection. Now imagine a partner who does love themselves. A disagreement becomes a chance to understand. Silence is not a rejection, but simply a moment of rest. The difference between those two scenarios is not the partner, it is the lens of self-love. The first sees love as fragile, constantly at risk of breaking. The second sees love as resilient because it is supported by two people who are already whole. And here lies the deeper philosophical truth. The love you give others is never greater than the love you hold for yourself. If you approach the world with self-hatred, your love will be poisoned by that hatred. If you approach it with self-respect, your love will carry that respect. Every act of love is in essence an echo of the way you treat your own soul. So the next time you think about what it means to love someone deeply, ask yourself first, how deeply do I love myself? Not in a selfish way, but in a way that honors your humanity, your flaws, your strengths, and your potential. Because when you cultivate that kind of self-love, every relationship in your life becomes richer, lighter, and more real. Let me leave you with this. The true test of self-love is not how kindly you treat yourself when life is easy, but how gently you treat yourself when you fail. And the love you extend to others will always mirror that. If you want to love others without fear, without control, without desperation, then start by learning to love yourself without conditions. Because only when love begins within can it truly flow outward without end.